This is Rob Tebbutt for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. Delighted, as always, to be joined by Judge Kalle Sauerland on Sunday, the day after the night before Anthony Joshua versus Kubrat Pulev. First and foremost, Kalle, how are you, my friend? Nice to see you as always.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the judge introduction. Actually, if I took my hat off, I'd look a bit like a judge today. I've got Sunday hair. So yeah, doing well. Enjoyed the show from Wembley last night. Interesting fights. I think the results all went the way that you'd expect them to, but I think there was, there were talking points around a few of the fights, and it was a good show.
Before we start the main event, let's talk about Lawrence Okolie. Lawrence Okolie is in a division that I think probably, if I was going to speak to somebody about cruiserweights, I think you'd be pretty high on the list of people I'd want to speak to. What did you make of his performance against Nikodem Jazuski?
A fantastic performance, and I think he's a great talent, and seemed to improve every fight. I mean, to be fair to him, he could only dispatch what's in front of you yesterday. The opponent was nothing, but he took him out very, very impressively, and did a good job. And it was difficult for him. Don't forget losing the world title status of the fight with Blavatsky so close to the event. I think he did a great job on it. I think he's certainly a future world champion. That's for sure.
As I mentioned, you've handled your fair share of cruiserweights over the years. Is he now ready? You know Krzysztof Blavatsky as well, better than most people. Is he now ready to take that jump? Did last night kind of rubber stamp that for you? Admittedly, against a much inferior opponent.
No, I mean last night did nothing for me. For me, he was ready before. But fights get pulled all the time at the moment for COVID reasons, and he was a victim to that. So there's no blaming him there. And he had to take care of what he was in front of him. But he's ready for Blavatsky. He was ready before. I think it'll be a good fight, but I do expect Okolie to win that fight.
Is he ready for Myris Bradis? I know Eddie's comments after the fight pricked your ears a little bit.
No, I think I'll let Eddie off with a bit of enthusiasm in the interview. I was actually on Twitter at the time when I heard it. I thought, I've got to put that out there. I said, you can't get away with that, Ed. You can't get away with that. Now there's levels, and listen, Okolie will get to that level. I'm sure he's progressing well. But it's a little early for something like that, I think, in my opinion. But if they're ready to tango, we're ready to tango too. So, I think Bradis has shown against the best cruiserweights, obviously in the World Boxing Super Series over 2 seasons. He was, it was one of them. It was a pick and fight with Usyk. One of the best fights I've ever seen live. Could have gone either way. I had it a draw, but could have gone either way. That fight was down to the last round. So you see the level of Bradis, and the way he dispatched of Dorticos in the final. The whole the guy's been in there so at the top level. He's a 3-time world champion, and he's a massive puncher on top of it. So and he's got one hell of a chin. So to say he's going to knock him out is but listen, that's what promoters are there for. That's what we do. We put things out there. I think they should stick with it. I think Blavatsky's a good fight. I think it's a good fight. I do fancy Okolie in that fight. I think he stops him late. But we'll see. But listen, great talent, Okolie, and he will be world champion.
What's the situation with Bradis? I heard, I think I read some stuff not too long about him potentially moving up to heavyweight again. Obviously, he's been up there before. Is that in his immediate future? Do you know? Yeah,
I think he's definitely planning to go to heavyweight. That'll probably come sooner rather than later. He's done everything you can do at cruiserweight. He's fought everyone. He's had an impeccable record, 3-time world champion. So I guess it's that sort of time where you check the boxes. He's a big cruiserweight, and you know he's beaten on paper. He's beaten the heavyweight champion of the world, Emmanuel Charles, by a vicious knockout. So, you know, we know we can punch at that weight. So, you know, I expect him to be a big success at heavyweight. You know, big success and a handful for anyone. And he's got a very, very good corner. Actually, the same corner that Bolotnik's had coming through that the Golden Contract tournament, the MTK Golden Contract tournament, and surprised everyone. And you can see, I mean, Bolotnik's is a good European fighter, but you could see that the tactics in those fights, and that's the same corner as Breedis, and he seems in a very good place. And I think I would be surprised if he doesn't go on and win a belt at heavyweight. You know, I really do.
Kalle, we need the Breidis Bolotnik's double header in Riga as soon as crowds can come back.
Yeah, this is a fantastic place to put on shows, and for sure, you know, there's a great venue, it's a great city, and the atmosphere there is I know the UK's got great atmosphere, but I tell you the atmosphere in Riga is very, very special. It's right up there, you know, right up there. It's a fantastic place to promote.
Okay, moving on to the heavyweights. Last night, Anthony Joshua, 9th round stoppage win over Kubrat Pulev. Again, somebody that you know very well, very well-travelled man that you are. What did you make of Anthony Joshua's performance?
I thought it was very solid. I think I expected him to win by stoppage. I think the plus point he'll take out of it is also, you know, Anthony seems to still learn from fight to fight. And you still see a learning curve with him. It's not completely normal when someone starts boxing relatively late, but I mean, he's got a very impressive CV of names in his especially in his defenses of his world championships. And I think last night, you know, he showed that from the Klitschko fight, which was a similar-ish situation where he had his man in big trouble. And he gassed in the Klitschko fight, completely gassed. And it was, you know, it was by, you know, psychology, whatever it was that got him through those couple of rounds where he was, the tank was empty, he couldn't get his hands up. And last night, he was in a similar situation in that he'd had his man in real serious trouble. The fight could have easily been stopped at that stage. It was back turning, there was all sorts going on, very clean punches landed. And he went on and he didn't try and force the finish. It felt like it came at a natural pace, you know. And it was actually quite a similar situation which stopped the fight in the 9th round. You know, it was the uppercuts. Man went down, and then he found the 1-2 and took him out in a textbook. But to get, it was, you know, you could see that the fact that it was 4, 5 rounds, 6 rounds later, and he'd worn his man down, it was a natural ending. It wasn't a forced ending. So I think McCracken is a great coach. They've worked on that. That in those situations that maybe he's not, you know, not overzealous, but I think also physically, he looks like he's really improved on his stamina, which is not easy to do if you look at, you know, Anthony's build. You know, he's a big muscular guy, and muscles, they are good to look at, but in a boxing ring, not always the best tool for going the distance. You know, very rare have you seen someone with Anthony's physique be a good 12-round fighter. Very, very rare, especially the big guys. You know? Smaller guys are so different, but the bigger guys, very rare. And if you look at the way he carried himself, I think the weight suits him. The weight looked good. So yeah, I think there's lots of plus points that you'll take from that.
Coming into the fight, a lot of the talk was about what version of Anthony Joshua were we going to see? Were we going to see the Anthony Joshua of old? Were we going to see the Anthony Joshua that we saw last year in Saudi Arabia? We kind of saw something somewhere in the middle. What did you think of his style?
Yeah, I don't make too much of this old Anthony Joshua and new Anthony Joshua. Every fight's a different type of fight, you know? And last night was you know, he knew what's Pulev's strengths. Pulev's strength is a good technical fighter. You know, he was 39 now. You know, let's say if he had that shot 3 years ago, you know, would have been a trickier fight. Anthony would have had less experience, and Pulev would have been a bit fresher. But it happened when it happened. So what's his strengths? His strengths is his technical ability and his go out and go gum shield mentality. You know, is his you know, the mentality. You know, I can tell you hundreds of stories of Pulev over the years. Great character, and not big heart, immense heart, proper fighting man. You know, he literally. He would have if he would have had 2 more seconds, he would have still got up for that count, and he would have continued 100%. You cannot stop Pulev without actually stopping the fight. That's the sure. You saw after the bell. Those are the assets. So I think he nullified that well. He boxed, you know, and he boxed well. I think. I think the fight in Saudi, everyone's now thinking about Joshua in that fight in Saudi. That was a tactical fight. It's a very, very tactical fight. He was a very different fighter that night in that he had a completely different approach. He wasn't going in there to take his man out. He was going in there to win on points, you know, and that's clearly didn't do that last night. But I think he would have settled for a points win. He didn't rush things last night. That's what he did well. I don't see a new Anthony or an old Anthony. I just see an Anthony that, you know, he had the right game plan last night, like he had the right game plan in Saudi, which, you know, with Rob McCracken, you know, he's a very, very good coach, a very experienced coach at amateur and professional level, and that's exactly what you'd expect to have in the corner of a heavyweight champ. So, you know, hats off to the corner, hats off for Anthony and the whole team for doing that. But I don't buy the old and new and whatever. It's you know, when he fights Fury now, he'll probably box a different fight as well.
Final word on Kubrat Pulev. You mentioned the fact that you know him very well. You've told me 1 or 2 stories. I'm sure you have plenty of stories that aren't necessarily fit for public consumption. But just a final word on him and working with him throughout his career, and, you know, what he chooses to do next. And you obviously mentioned that he's 39 years of age. I would assume that there's not too many fights left in the tank potentially. What would you like to see next for Kubrat Pulev?
Well, first of all, as a person, he's a lovely guy. He's a real man's man, and real old school fighting man. And, you know, it was a pleasure to work with, and you know, he was, you know, he's a character. You know, he's an absolute character. I'll tell you a quick story. I never forget. I was in Bulgaria with him, and we've been at a convention. It was a WBA convention there. We were in the hotel bar, and he is the king of Bulgaria. You know? So I said, fancy a drink? He just had his fight, so he wasn't in training. He goes, you want a drink? I said, well, you know, have a swift beer or something. And he said, oh, me drink. You're in Bulgaria now. We drink. So I go, right, okay, mate, okay. And he's very, you know, he saw this with a fist pumping and all this, and he's exactly that what he's like. And he's come back from the bar, and I'm sort of playing on my phone. He's come to the table with a tray. When I say a tray, I mean like the biggest sort of tray you can find in a restaurant. And it must have had 100, 150 tequila shots on it. I'm looking at him, what? You know, it's like 5 in the afternoon. He goes, no, you say we drink, now we really drink. And I'm like, oh my God. So but I'm looking at him speechless. And before I can say it, he's done about 3 of them, you know, on the spin. He said, come on. I was hysterical. I remember we did it. It was Jack Kulkai was there as well. He was obviously a little bit lighter, super welterweight. I think Kulkai was legless after about 10 minutes. There was an interesting. I've got hundreds of them with him. He's a character. Listen, he's come up short in his 2 chances, but one thing's for sure, he went out on his shield on both of them. You know, maybe even a little bit too brave, but there is no too brave in Kubrat's world. Wish him all the best, and, you know, I do think it's the time has come.
If he's too much of a party boy for Kalle Sauerland, I bet he's a right live wire and a night owl.
I didn't say how the evening ended, did I? I didn't say how the evening ended. I didn't say who won. You got to take me out on a shield as well, mate.
Yeah, you have to be carried out.
Yeah.
Quite literally.
Wild night in Sofia, that's for sure. It was a wild night in Sofia. Me and the Cobra.
Back to Anthony Joshua. Now much of the talk is around Tyson Fury, but there is, of course, Alexander Usyk waiting in the wings for the WBO mandatory title shot. What do you think will come next?
I think Fury. I will be very surprised if it's not Fury. Be disappointed if it weren't Fury. It's the fight that everyone wants to see, boxing wants to see, and it's it's time. We haven't had one since Lennox. It's time for an undisputed, isn't it? So yeah, it's the fight that everyone wants to see. Whether of course it's an all British affair, but yeah, come on, you undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. You'd be talking about that, whether it's in Britain or whether it's in Mongolia. Doesn't make a difference.
Anything that you saw from last night from AJ change your viewpoint on that fight at all?
No, not really. Listen, everyone's going to have their opinions on it. Opinions I like, but my opinion is that last night I saw it again. AJ always learning in fight, and that's making him 100% a more complete boxer. But Tyson Fury, for me, is a complete boxer. He's in a different stage of his career, perhaps. And Tyson Fury came on this planet as a boxing man. And I just think he's got so many tools in his arsenal that he's very difficult to prepare for. What Tyson you're going to see? You're going to see either Tyson that's going to push him on the front, on the back foot, like he did with Wilder. You're going to see someone who's going to box like against Klitschko. Tyson for me is a very, very complete boxer. Obviously it's a heavyweight fight, and they're both very big men, and someone lands clean, that's the end of. But my money would be on Fury. I think Tyson's at that point in his career, where he's a complete fighter.
Just want to grab a couple of bits on the rest of the undercard. Martin Okolie against Sergei Kuzmin. Fight that I was quite excited about going in, and I don't think it quite took off. What did you think?
I thought it took off early. After 2-3 rounds, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to get into this," and I sort of switched off. The fight sort of switched me off. Yeah, it was okay. I mean, Kuzmin, I almost signed him coming out the amateurs years ago. I remember him sitting in my office, and he wanted to stay amateur or something at the time. I don't recognise him anymore. I always have to check: is it the same one I met? Did they send an imposter? I understand it's heavyweight, and I can understand that everyone's got a different body shape and type and whatever. But for me, he doesn't look like he's. I mean, he's clearly stamina-wise fit, but there's no athleticism in there. He was a solid, very solid puncher as an amateur. That dynamic's all gone for me. He landed clean a few times last night, absolute zero effect. And Bacoldi's been stopped before, so it's what happened there. So Kuzmin for me, very, very disappointing. I think Martin's a work in progress. I think he's got great potential, really great potential. I think he's obviously from a boxing family, amazing story. His background, I didn't know the half of it till last night. I did some reading up on it, and it was very, very interesting. He seems like a real character. And for me, a little square in certain parts of the fight. Like I was literally, is he switching? He looked for me. He was up. He's going to switch between stances now, because it was so square on. And I think that's something that Billy, who's a great trainer, is going to have to work on, because he can't do that against the big boys. You stand square with anyone with power in heavyweight boxing. It's a dangerous thing to do.
What would you like to see next week?
But worthy winner. I mean, listen. When it comes to Hrgovic, we put out an offer to to Michael Hunter a couple of weeks ago. Nothing back, so probably back to the drawing board next week. And Okolie's certainly on that list. You know, it's a good fight. It's a good fight. Yeah, I mean, if I was them, I'm not sure I would take the Hrgovic fight. I think there's a step in between there maybe from, but I'm not sure. It's a good fight, that's for sure.
And elsewhere on the card, another heavyweight fight, Hughie Fury. I've never seen Hughie Fury fight like that before. I don't know if you have, but
I thought it was very interesting to see. I watched like the pre-fight talks or interviews and stuff, and if you ever met Hughie Fury, he's a very, very, very humble, nice, really well, just very well mannered. You know, he's very nice person. And I was really, he said, you know, he was swearing and cursing, and I'm thinking, this is interesting. I'm sure he's not on a, you know, some of us fighters do it because they talk up because they need to sell tickets or pay-per-views. But I don't think there was much issue with selling tickets for the fight. So it was from him. So I was like looking at it, I'm thinking, this is going to be interesting, because when he goes into this fight, he seems spiteful in these interviews. And Marius Vac is a nice fella. He seems a bit dopey, but he's a nice enough guy, yeah. So it was like, it was no target. It wasn't like he'd been targeted and this was retaliation. No, this was Hughie Fury going out spiteful. Exactly the way he boxed, by the way, in the first few rounds. He came out like a man possessed, yeah. Although I thought it wasn't a great plan to start with, I think he overdid it. It was great to see. I really enjoyed it because it was like, I think he's a very good fighter, Hughie Fury. I think he's 26 years old. There's a lot of time to still develop there as well. But he's fought incredible opposition already, and he just went in, and I think it was almost over excitement. You know, oh, tonight I'm going to make a statement, but he went in. He really went in there and tried, and you know, it was too much for me inside work going on that was a bit messy. But you know what? It was great to see Hugh doing it, because it was not the usual one you used to see, very technical. It was a bit mad, actually. It was cool. And then there was the cut situation, and I can't believe that no one didn't. You know, Marius Vac has been around the pro game since 2005, right? 15 years as a pro, 40 odd fights. I think I don't quite buy that was unintentional. If you watch, he comes out the corner as though he's throwing a right, and he hasn't thrown it, but he has moved the head as though he's throwing it. So you could say, yeah, he was fainting. He was moving to the other side. The Wac's not that type of fighter. You know, if he moves, he throws. and I thought there was a little bit more. You know, he knew what he was doing with that head. A fighter who's been 15 years as a pro, he knows where his head is at a certain time, and it was exactly in the corner. He popped up with it as though it was a right going in over the top. It was his head moving, and I thought this guy did a fantastic job picking that up, by the way, because I didn't spot it. But watching the fight, I couldn't see it. I was on the couch, but I couldn't see it. So I don't know. For me, it was anyway. In the end, it didn't really matter. But I just thought it was an interesting point. I want to get it off my chest, but what the cut did, first of all, incredible job by the cutman. I thought that fight was over when you saw the corner. I thought they'll give it a round. They let it go. Cutman, fantastic job. I think Kerry Kay's it was fantastic cutman work. Absolutely. Why? Every fighter, invest in a cutman. Your team should be the promoter or a manager, whoever it is, invest in a cutman, because that's why they save fights. And actually, the cut, it seemed to have a very positive effect, because he still had this spitefulness that, for me, has a little bit always been missing with Hughie. He had that last time, but he went back to boxing, but with spite, if you understand what I mean. So he went from boxer to the first 3-4 rounds, whatever it was, boom, spiteful, bit messy, but you wanted real spitefulness, and then he slipped into a wonderful pattern, and I was very impressed with him. By the way, good fight, Okolie against Hughie Fury. Good fight.
I like that fight as well. I actually put out a poll last night on Twitter about that fight.
Yeah.
2020 keeps getting stranger. You've got Hughie Fury and Marius Vac engaging in a blood and guts war in the trenches.
Yeah. I mean, and if I would look to them two fights on the undercard, two heavyweight fights on the undercard, and I had to pick one to watch, I probably would have watched the Okolie fight, because I thought there was going to be more in it. I did think that Hughie would just simply outbox him, for the 10 rounds, completely outbox him, and it wouldn't be the most, spectacular fight. But I thought he would outbox exactly the opposite, actually, because that was the one for me was the most interesting fight on the undercard. I thought it was great to see that Hughie and Peter is for me one of the best boxing brains and coaches in the game, without a shadow of a doubt.
Okay, Kalle, well, before I let you go, what's new with you, my friend? I hear rumours. The streets are talking to me about the World Boxing Super Series. What can you tell me?
Yeah, listen, we're getting into shape, but we'll be looking for a big 2021. But before Christmas, you're not going to hear too much from us. We're looking exactly at how to do it and what to do it with in terms of weights. But also, obviously, looked very interesting last night at that 1,000-person limit, which was hats off to Matchroom for doing that last night. It's a good sign. It's a bit weird because everything's getting locked down, but now suddenly we've got 1,000 people at boxes. I think we might still go for a bit of darkness, but it was a very important step last night, those 1,000. I hope they enjoyed it.
Absolutely, and hopefully we continue to grow and we can start getting some crowds back through the turnstiles, but through the doors as soon as possible.
I think summer next year. I think you'll see it before, but I think to get to that sort of 70, 80, 90% capacities, I think summer next year is realistic. Okay, with the German vaccine, Rob? With the German
Those
vaccine.
Those Germans. Productive. Okay, Kalle. As always, mate, thank you very much for speaking to Boxing Social. Do appreciate your time on a Sunday. Judge Kalle rules again on Joshua Pulev and Lawrence Okolie versus Myris Bradus. Always a pleasure catching up with you, Your Honour. And I will see you in court I'll see you in court next Sunday, where the case in question will be Canelo Alvarez versus Callum Smith.
We do it. Court adjourned.
Cheers, Kalle.